A discreet appearance when their sons gave evidence at the public inquiry last summer. Then the 5 men were the target of public outrage. Their mothers say they've decided to break their long silence now because their sons have had their lives ruined. Their names and faces, they say, are known to everyone as suspected killers. When the Daily Mail named the 5 men as murderers 2 years ago, the women say they wanted to take legal action but couldn't find the large sum of money needed. Now they say their sons would go into the witness box and give evidence to clear their names.
If they got a fair hearing and their safety was guaranteed, yes, we'd all do it tomorrow.
Yes.
Our sons have been tried, convicted and condemned by the media.
In a statement, the Daily Mail said it stood by its story and would welcome the opportunity to establish the truth in a court of law. A libel lawyer said tonight the outcome of any such case wouldn't be conclusive proof of guilt or innocence.
If a libel case were to be brought, it would help establishing whether or not the boys were guilty or innocent. The test in a libel case is not the same as that in a criminal case, but undoubtedly, if the Daily Mail were to win and the boys were to lose, it would be a strong indication that they were guilty of the murder.
Since Stephen Lawrence's murder at this bus stop in southeast London nearly 6 years ago, the 5 men have had 2 opportunities to make their case in public at no expense. At the inquest 2 years ago, the men chose to exercise their right not to answer questions. Last year, their lawyers went to the High Court to limit the scope of questioning of the men at the public inquiry. As a result, they couldn't be asked any questions relating to their guilt or innocence. The mothers say this secret police film showing some of the men using violent racist obscenities was very upsetting, but they say it was caused by resentment following months of persecution.
I didn't like looking at my sons holding knives at all. It upset me terribly. It did, and I feel. But what can I say any more about it? All I can say is that they was just acting out. They wasn't there hurting anybody.
That video is a product of what has happened to them boys. They was hitting back with words only in their own home after 18 months of persecution.
The report of the public inquiry is due out next week. It may be no coincidence that the mothers of the 5 men have decided to intervene now. Rita Chakrabarti, BBC News.
Well, as you heard, the findings of the official inquiry into Stephen Lawrence's death are expected next week. And the inquiry team visited a number of cities to examine different approaches to policing and racism. One of them was Bradford, from where our special correspondent Ben Brown reports.
He is dreaming of promotion, but 14 years after Cash Singh first joined the West Yorkshire Police Force, he's still a bobby on the beat.
Hello, good morning, Malcolm. How are you? Hi, good to see you.
Nice to see you again.
I've come to see you regarding the theft that we had a few
PC Singh had hoped to become a detective, but he was turned down. Even though roughly 20% of people in Bradford are black or Asian, just 4% of the city's police force are from the ethnic minorities.
I look at the specialist squad. The figures I have is that there's only 1 Asian detective within Bradford. That is not good enough.
He told me he has suffered from some racism within the police force, though it's not nearly as bad as it was.
What we used to witness 14 years ago is no longer evident at all.
What kind of thing was that?
Just the canteen culture. It was blatant, it was open, but it's not there anymore.
Even so, the young Asians who rioted in the Manningham area of Bradford did so because they said their police force was racist. 4 years on from those riots, and tension in this area of Bradford has eased considerably. Relations between the police and the ethnic minorities have improved. Still though, if you're Asian and you live here, you're twice as likely to be stopped and searched as if you're white. It's why the Lawrence inquiry team came to Bradford, to get people's views on their police force, to find out what it's doing wrong and what it's doing right.
Sunrise Radio.
In one initiative, West Yorkshire Police have launched their own weekly show on Bradford's Asian radio station, trying to forge closer links with the community.
I think they're trying, but I don't believe it's hard enough. I think there is a lot of more work to be done, and it will take an awful long time to actually close the gap that has been caused, particularly after the Manningham riots.
But in another initiative, police in some of the most run-down areas of Bradford are working with community leaders, setting up centres like this one, where people can come and report crimes of racial harassment if they don't trust their local police station.
The police force, they have changed their attitude, they are more opening to the communities, they are listening to the communities, as is reflected in the Ethnic Minority Liaison Police Committee.
Young Asians, though, in particular, are still to be convinced, and the police themselves in Bradford admit they may have more lessons to learn.
No doubt when the Lawrence inquiry is published, there will be markers and there will be lessons in there for all of us to take on board and introduce right across the country in terms of how to tackle and how to deal with racial harassment.
For PC Cash Singh, the key lesson is that the police need to recruit and keep more officers like him if they're to be a service that all the people can believe in. Ben Brown, BBC News, Bradford.
A clean-up operation is underway on Teesside, where a leak of acid has contaminated a marshland wildlife site. Environmentalists say the spillage of hydrochloric acid from the Tioxide plant near Seal Sands is potentially devastating. Birds such as curlew, redshank and shelduck use the site for shelter and feeding. Nigerians vote tomorrow in a landmark vote for a new parliament. After years of military government, the election is a big step towards restoring civilian rule. Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation, rich in oil and gas, but it's also become notorious for corruption, human rights abuse and poverty. Our Africa correspondent Jeremy Vine reports from the Niger Delta, the source of the country's oil wealth, but also home to some of its poorest people.
Nigeria's military rulers have been masters of illusion. While the country's oil industry produced millions of dollars, the people running the government simply made the money disappear. 2 million barrels of crude come out of the ground every day. Oil accounts for 2/3 of the government's income. So in the south, the rigs of international companies are visible everywhere. Visible, but not that easy to reach. It can be a difficult trip getting to the oil installations and the tiny villages dotted around them. A long journey down the Niger Delta ends at Nembi Creek. It's a place that says much about the state this country is in. Everywhere you go here, you see the flame where Shell burn off gas at their pumping station, and you hear anger.
Our people has nothing. No benefit from this Shell, no employment, no render, no nothing from Shell. They are just here for their own purpose, their own money.
There's no electricity here, and the local tailor has one of the few jobs going. The oil companies say they do fund development programs, but they are very heavily taxed, and government money never seems to get near these polluted places. People like Adam Ombu belong to a youth organization of the Ijaw tribe, which is becoming increasingly militant because they say, for example, they can't fish in clean water, and they're begging a new government to change things.
This system we are in now is like we are rejected people. We are not Nigerian. We are only living in Nigeria.
There are millions of people in this country who feel the same. Its wealth is close enough to touch, and yet Nigerians have no part in it. It is a telling contrast. On the one hand, Nigeria's oil wealth, and on the other, its agonizing poverty. It may all seem a long way from the election, but in fact, it could not be closer, because the next government's biggest task will be to bring Nigeria together, to give its poor people a share in the country's riches. Jeremy Vine, BBC News, on the Niger Delta.
The man Tony Blair once